Step into the unknown with Serenity Valley Stories. Remember to like and subscribe, if you wish to hear more. And now our feature presentation, The Marsh's Shadow. I've lived in Virginia all my life. The rolling hills, the dense forests, the mist-covered marshes, they're all a part of me. I know the land like the back of my hand, every twist in the river, every hidden trail through the woods. Or at least, I thought I did. There are some things in those woods that you can't know until they find you, and when they do, it's too late to turn back. It was late October, the time of year when the days grow shorter and the nights stretch out like a dark, endless road. The air was cool, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. I had decided to take my dog, Max, on a hike near the marshlands, a place I'd visited countless times before. Max was a large, loyal German shepherd, always eager to explore. He'd never shown any signs of fear in those woods, and his presence made me feel secure, even in the most remote areas. We set out just before dusk, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. The trail wound through the forest, eventually leading to the marshes, where the ground softened and the air grew thick with the scent of mud and stagnant water. Max trotted ahead, his ears perked up, his nose to the ground as he sniffed out all the usual scents: deer, raccoons, maybe a fox or two. But as we approached the marsh, he slowed down, his posture stiffening. I stopped and called him back. "What's up, boy?" Max turned and looked at me, his eyes dark and wary. It wasn't like him to act this way, and it set off a small alarm in the back of my mind. Still, I pushed on, thinking it was probably just some animal that had spooked him. The marsh was eerily quiet, the only sounds the occasional rustle of reeds and the distant croak of a frog. The sun had almost disappeared, leaving the sky a deep indigo. I turned on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the thickening gloom. The light caught on something shiny near the edge of the water, a pair of eyes, low to the ground, reflecting the light back at me. I froze, gripping the flashlight tighter. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding far too loud in the quiet. The eyes blinked, then disappeared, sinking back into the shadows. Max growled low in his throat, a sound I'd never heard from him before. His fur bristled along his spine, and he stood protectively in front of me. I shone the flashlight around, but there was nothing to see, just reeds and water, the occasional ripple breaking the surface. But the sense of being watched was overwhelming. My heart pounded in my chest, and I took an involuntary step back, suddenly wishing I hadn't come out here so late. "Let's go, Max," I said, my voice trembling. "We've seen enough." Max didn't need any encouragement. He turned and began trotting back the way we came, but he kept looking over his shoulder, his ears flat against his head. I followed close behind, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. We hadn't gone far when I heard it, a low, guttural croak, deep and resonant, unlike any frog I'd ever heard. It echoed through the marsh, sending a chill down my spine. Max stopped and growled again, staring intently into the darkness. I swung the flashlight around, and there it was, standing in the water, half hidden by the reeds. At first, I thought it was just a man, someone else out in the marshes at the wrong time of night. But then it moved, stepping out into the open, and I realized it wasn't a man at all. It was tall, easily 6 feet or more, with a body that was disturbingly human in shape but covered in smooth, dark skin that gleamed in the flashlight's beam. Its eyes were large and bulbous, sitting high on its head, and its mouth was wide, stretching across its face in a grotesque grin. Long, webbed fingers dangled at its sides, and as it moved, it made that same low, croaking sound. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The thing stared at us, its eyes unblinking, and then it started to move forward, each step slow and deliberate, as if it knew we had nowhere to run. Max barked furiously, snapping me out of my paralysis. "Run!" I shouted, shoving him ahead of me. I turned and bolted down the trail, the sound of splashing water behind me telling me that the creature was following. Max ran ahead, but he kept looking back, as if to make sure I was still there. My legs felt like lead, my lungs burning with each breath. The marsh seemed to stretch on forever, the trees and reeds blurring together in my panicked state. The croaking grew louder, closer, until I could almost feel the creature's breath on the back of my neck. We burst out of the marsh and into the forest, the ground firmer beneath our feet. I thought we were safe, that the creature would give up the chase now that we were out of its territory. But then I heard Max yelp in pain, a sharp, high-pitched sound that sent a jolt of fear through me. I turned just in time to see the creature lunge at Max, its webbed fingers wrapping around his body. Max struggled, snapping and growling, but the creature was strong, much stronger than I had anticipated. I watched in horror as it dragged him back toward the marsh, its eyes locked on mine the entire time. "Max!" I screamed, running after them, but my legs felt like they were moving through molasses. The creature reached the water, pulling Max into the dark, murky depths. His barks became frantic, desperate, and then they were gone, swallowed by the marsh. I stood at the edge of the water, my chest heaving, my mind unable to process what I had just seen. The creature disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only ripples in its wake. Max was gone, taken by something I couldn't even begin to understand. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the water, waiting for Max to resurface. But he didn't. All that was left was an empty, suffocating silence. Eventually, I forced myself to move. My entire body was trembling, and every instinct was screaming at me to get away, to run and never look back. I stumbled through the forest, the darkness pressing in on me from all sides. My mind raced with thoughts of Max, of those terrible eyes, of the grotesque grin that had haunted my every step. When I finally made it back to my truck, I collapsed against the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I fumbled with the door, practically falling into the driver's seat. I slammed the door shut and locked it, as if that flimsy barrier could keep out the nightmare I'd just experienced. I sat there for what felt like hours, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart pounding in my chest. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble of fear and grief and disbelief. Max was gone. My loyal companion, my protector, gone in an instant, taken by something that shouldn't exist. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. The thought of facing my empty house, of having to explain what had happened, was too much to bear. Instead, I sat in the truck, the darkness outside feeling like a living thing, pressing in on me, suffocating me. Eventually, I started the engine and drove. I don't remember the drive home, don't remember anything until I was standing in my living room, staring blankly at the spot where Max's bed used to be. The silence was overwhelming, the house too quiet, too empty. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's face. I heard its croak, felt its presence looming over me. I saw Max, struggling against it, his eyes wide with fear. The image was seared into my mind, a nightmare that I couldn't escape. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the marsh, couldn't bear the thought of facing the place where Max had been taken. I tried to rationalize what had happened, to tell myself it was just some strange animal, something that could be explained away. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen the impossible, something that defied all logic, all reason. I haven't been back to the marsh since that night. I avoid the area entirely, taking different routes, steering clear of any mention of it. But the memory lingers, a shadow that follows me wherever I go. I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, waiting, watching. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it, the low, guttural croak, echoing in the back of my mind. It haunts my dreams, turns them into twisted, dark reflections of that night. And every time I hear it, I feel a deep, gnawing fear, a reminder that some things are best left unexplored. I lost more than my dog that night. I lost a part of myself, the part that believed the world was safe, that monsters only existed in stories. Now, I know better. I know there are things out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And I know that, no matter how far I run, I can never truly escape the memory of that night. It clings to me like a dark, invisible shroud, wrapping itself around my thoughts, my dreams, my every waking moment. No matter how much time passes, the terror remains as fresh as it was in those marshlands. I've tried to move on, to forget, but it's impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I see those bulging eyes staring at me from the darkness, that wide, grotesque grin that seemed to mock my fear. I hear Max's desperate barks, his yelp of pain, and the terrible silence that followed as the marsh swallowed him whole. I stopped going on hikes, stopped visiting the places I once loved. The forests and trails that had once brought me peace now filled me with dread. Even the sound of frogs croaking in the distance, a sound I once found soothing, now sends a chill down my spine. I tried to talk about it once, to explain what happened to a friend. But the words caught in my throat, and I couldn't bring myself to describe what I'd seen. How do you tell someone that your dog was taken by a creature that shouldn't exist? How do you explain the unexplainable? So, I kept it to myself, burying the fear deep down, pretending it wasn't there. But the nightmares persisted, growing worse with each passing night. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the echoes of that awful croak still ringing in my ears, my heart racing as if I were still running for my life. I thought about moving, about leaving Virginia behind and starting fresh somewhere far away from the marshes. But I knew it wouldn't help. The fear would follow me, no matter where I went. It wasn't the place that haunted me, it was the memory, the knowledge that something like that existed in the world. The months dragged on, each day blending into the next, a fog of grief and fear that I couldn't shake. I barely ate, barely slept. I withdrew from friends and family, isolating myself in my small, empty house. Max's absence was a constant, painful reminder of what I'd lost, a hole in my life that nothing could fill. Then, one night, I heard it again. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when the sound drifted through the open window, a low, deep croak, echoing through the stillness of the night. My blood ran cold, and I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was just a frog, just a harmless creature in the distance. But deep down, I knew better. The sound was too familiar, too close, too much like the one I'd heard that night in the marsh. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the window, slamming it shut and locking it tight. But even with the window closed, I could still hear it, faint but unmistakable, the croak of the frogman, calling out from the darkness. I pressed my back against the wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind raced, torn between the urge to run and the knowledge that there was nowhere to go. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in fear, listening to that awful sound. Eventually, it faded, swallowed by the night, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of my room. But the fear remained, coiled tight in my chest, a constant, gnawing presence that wouldn't let go. I've come to realize that I'll never escape it, never outrun the memory of what happened. The frogman took more than just Max that night. It took my peace, my sense of safety, my belief that the world was a place I could understand and navigate. Now, I live in a state of perpetual unease, always waiting for the next time I hear that croak, always bracing for the moment when the darkness comes alive once more. The marshes are still out there, still hiding their secrets, still waiting for the next unlucky soul to wander too close. And the frogman is out there too, watching, waiting, biding its time. I know it's only a matter of time before it comes for me again, before it drags me down into the darkness where Max now rests. Until then, all I can do is wait and hope that, when it does come, I'll be ready. But deep down, I know the truth. No one is ever ready for something like that. And no one ever escapes it, not really. It's a part of me now, a shadow that follows me wherever I go, a reminder that some things are better left unexplored, some places better left untouched. So, if you're ever near the marshes, if you ever find yourself drawn to the still, dark waters, remember my story. Remember that there are things out there, things that watch and wait, things that are more than just legends. And if you hear a low, deep croak in the night, run. Run as fast as you can and don't look back. Because if you don't, it will find you. And when it does, you'll never be the same again. Thank you for watching Serenity Valley Stories. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another scary tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below.